All right, attempt number 2. We'll see if this works out. Oh, you can see the crinkle in my wall. Ooh, see, I had a webcam that was. Don't want to do that. Anyway, hi, welcome. If you're catching me live, I love and appreciate you. I think you know that. If you are catching a replay, I love and appreciate you as well. But let me know. Comment, replay. Hooray. I am so glad I just signed in. I had my little Behringer mess up on me. Hooray. Thank you for coming back, ladies. I'm going to go ahead and dive back in, though. Chapter 5.2, 2.0. Chapter 5, 2.0. All right. Controlling the environment. What became obvious to the brainwashers is that a new system based on appeal to emotionalism was needed. And in order to break through the population's moral compasses, society needed to be reduced to infantilism. Writing in 1972's Tavistock's leading media expert, Dr. Fred Emery, reported on television's impact on Americans. We are suggesting that television evokes a basic assumption of dependency. It must evoke this because it is essentially an emotional and irrational activity. Television is the nonstop leader who provides nourishment and protection. In his formative report on television's impact on cognitive powers of an individual, investigative journalist Lonnie Wolfe says that both Emery and Eric Trist, excuse me, who until his death in 1993 headed Tavistock's operations in the United States, noted that all television had a dissociative effect on mental capabilities, making people less able to think rationally. Viewers, as they became habituated to watching 6 hours or more of television daily, surrender their powers of reason to the images and sound coming from the tube. Tavistock recognized that habituated television watching destroys the ability of a person for critical cognitive activity. In other words, it makes you stupid. Now, I have been trying to build this YouTube channel, and I've been working at it for years, but I haven't really dug in until recently. And I'm about to expose myself because I also listen to stuff when I sleep. I listen to biblical sleep meditations. So we'll just, give me a little leeway for that. But let's see how long I spend on my phone. Let's find screen time. I implore everybody to do this. Make sure you're aware. I'm having trouble finding it. Let me see. How much do I average in screen time daily? Can you look at my phone, Siri, and tell me how much screen time I average daily? Oh, she doesn't understand. Crap. I thought this would be fun and embarrassing a little. Let's see. Screen time? Okay, I'm not finding it. Never mind. But it's hours. It's 10 to 15 hours, including my nighttime stuff. And it's 30-second video clips, 30 to a minute video clips. When I'm not shaming anybody, it's like a career, It's interesting. And they're only looking at television in this chapter, but it's eye-opening for sure. Yeah. Right. And they say the earbuds like microwave your brain, but I can't do without them. I even walk around with them on silent just because it kind of dampens the noise and I get a little overstimulated with loud noises. Overstimulated Moms Club. All right. For to bring society down to the level of a beast is especially important from the point of view of Tavistock, if they are to control the planet Earth, since the only source of increase of mankind's power as a species within and upon the universe is that manifold and validated discoveries of physical principle. It follows that the only form of human action that distinguished man from beast is that form of action which is identified as cognition, by means of which the act of discovery of accumulated validatable universal physical principles is generated. That is one entire sentence. And when it started with for to bring, I was waiting for the it necessary follows, and that was 8 lines down. Oh, it was 5 lines down, but I was like, Lord. So I don't think I read that proper, but we're going to move on because that was a lot. So it is the accumulation of such knowledge for practice in this way from generation to generation, which defines the provable evidence of the absolute difference between man and beast. However, dissociative effect is but one of the aspects of overcoming resistance and changing the established paradigm of society. According to brainwashers at Tavistock Institute, according to brainwashers at Tavistock Institute, tone counts. All right, guys. Listen to Theodore Adorno of Frankfurt School. It seems obvious, quote, it seems obvious that the modification of the potentially fascist structure cannot be achieved by psychological means alone. The task is comparable to that of eliminating neuroses or delinquency or nationalism from the world. There are products of the total organization of society these are products of the total organization of society and are to be changed only as the society is changed. It is not for the psychologist to say how much changes are to be brought about. Did you notice? So I grew up I was born in 82. Grew up in the 80s and 90s. And it was a magical thing to be patriotic, to be an American. And now, if you are patriotic, you're accused of being a nationalist. And it seems to me that is the one-way ticket to a globalist government and dollar and so forth. The problem is, one, which requires the effort of all scientists. Did I skip? Yes, no, I'm fine. Okay. Eddie, hooray, double D. Of course, you join me when I'm stumbling. I was about to read a sentence for the second time, but I'm going to skip. So all that we would insist upon is that in the councils or roundtables where the problem is considered and action planned, the psychologist should have a voice. We believe that the scientific understanding of society must include an understanding of what it does to people, and that it is possible to have social reforms, even broad and sweeping ones, which, though desirable in their own right, would not necessarily change the structure of the prejudiced personality. For the fascist potential to change or even to be held in check, there must be an increase in people's capacity to see themselves and to be themselves. This cannot be achieved by the manipulation of people, however, well grounded in modern psychology, the devices of manipulation might be. It is here that psychology may play its most important role. Techniques for overcoming resistance, developed mainly in the field of individual psychotherapy, can be improved and adapted for use with groups and even for use on a mass scale. Hooray. I'm glad you're here, double D. All right. Social turbulence. As a point of interest at Tavistock, Eric Trist and Frederick Emery developed a theory of social turbulence, a so-called softening up effect of future shocks, wherein a population could be softened up through mass phenomena such as energy shortages, COVID, I've added that, economic and financial collapse, or terrorist attack. If the shocks were to come close enough to each other, and if they were delivered with increasing intensity, then it was possible to drive the entire society into a state of mass psychosis, claimed Trist and Emery. They also stated that individuals would become disassociated as they tried to flee from the terror of the shocking emerging reality. People would withdraw into a state of denial, retreating into popular entertainment and diversions, while being prone to outbursts of rage. BLM after COVID for a month? In fact, we are talking about two sides of the same coin here. On one side, guiding the covert, subtle manipulation and control of thought and human consciousness through the power of television, while on the other side, directly and overtly shifting the paradigm, changing the basic concepts, widening the parameters, and changing the rules by which society defines itself. One of the key individuals involved in the psychological warfare against the population through manufactured social turbulence is Kurt Lewin, a pioneer in group dynamics who was part of the early Frankfurt School and fled Germany when Hitler took power. This passage from his book, Time, Perspective, and Morale, shows his understanding of psychological warfare. Quote, "One of the main techniques for breaking morale through a strategy of terror consists in exactly this tactic. Keep the person hazy as to where he stands and just what he may expect. If, in addition, frequent vacillations between severe disciplinary measures and promises of good treatment together with spreading of contradictory news, make the cognitive structure of this situation utterly unclear. Then the individual may cease to even know when a particular plan would lead towards or away from his goal." They say that when training dogs, too. Hello, welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you only sometimes reward your dog, that has more effective training potential than constantly rewarding your dog. When you're, if you're like, sit and you give them a treat, if you don't give them a treat the next time and you do it again, thank you. Aw. All right, goals. Man, I had my finger there and then I had to gesture. So under these conditions, even those who have definite goals are ready to take risks, will be paralyzed by severe inner conflicts in regards to what to do. Over the past 50 years, research in the fields of psychology, sociology, and psychiatry has shown that the human mind is capable in dealing with a limited number of changes around it. According to Science Policy Research Unit, SPRU, at Tavistock Sussex University facility, Future Shocks is designed as physical and psychological distress arising from the excess load on the decision-making mechanism of the human mind. In other words, a series of events which come so fast that the human brain cannot absorb the information. One scenario is called superficiality. After continuous shocks, according to Emery and Trist, the large targeted population group discovers that it does not want to make choices anymore, reducing the value of his intentions. This strategy can only be pursued by denying the deeper roots of humanity that bind people together on a personal level by denying their individual psyche. Yes, thank you. Hit the like. Apathy takes over, often preceded by mindless violence, such as is characteristic of the Los Angeles street gangs in the 1960s and in the 80s. What Emery and Trist called organized social response to dissociation, as described in the pages of Anthony Burgess's novel A Clockwork Orange. So I don't know what this says about my dad, but he watched the movie while I was in the room, and I was mystified and captivated at a very young age, far too young to watch A Clockwork Orange. Anyway, but I loved Kubrick from that moment on, and interesting what he says himself about the moon landing. You seen that? The whole world is a psyop. All right. Where was I? Clockwork Orange. A society dominated by infantile, animal-like rage. Quote, "Such a group becomes easy to control and will docilely follow orders without rebelling, which is the object of the exercise." Add Tristan Emery. So what more, the dissociated adult cannot exert moral authority over their children. Excuse me. Because they are too involved with their own infantile fantasies. brought to them through their television set. Oh, that reminds me of Matilda. You remember that movie, Danny DeVito? So, if you doubt what I'm saying, look at the older generation today as they have accepted the moral decadence of the no future generation of its children. Rather than seek conflict, and in the process, the adults have come to accept a lower moral standard. Just as in Huxley's drug controlled Brave New World, there are no moral or emotional choices to make here. The Flower Children and the drug soaked rebellion of the Vietnam era is a perfect example of how this scenario functions. These frequent vacillations pass through several scenarios. Stable, at which point people more or less are able to adapt to what's happening to them, or it's turbulent, at which point people either take action to relieve the tension or they adapt to accept tension-filled environments. If the turbulence does not cease or is intensified, then at a certain point people cease being able to adapt in a positive way. According to Trist and Emery, people become maladaptive. They choose a response to tension that degrades their lives. They start to repress reality, denying its existence, and constructing increasingly more infantile fantasies to enable them to cope. Under the conditions of increasing social turbulence, people change their values, yielding to new degraded values, values that are less human and more animal-like. I just saw recently a commercial for tardive dyskinesia drugs. And that was something I remember seeing a guy come out. It was like a video. It was the first case people had heard of tardive dyskinesia, which is a result of taking prolonged, like Prozac and those sorts of drugs. And now they're like, you can continue taking Prozac and take this drug for the results of continued use of Prozac. And I thought RFK was going to get rid of stinking commercials like that. My kids always groan when they see them, and I love that. They understand it's garbage. Oh, where was I? Brave New World, Vietnam era. So these frequent vacillations, oh my goodness, maladaptive under the conditions. So the second scenario is segmentation of society into smaller parts. In this scenario, it's every group, ethnic, racial, and sexual against the other. Nations break apart into regional groups. Those smaller areas, in turn, fissure into even smaller areas along ethnic lines. They add more letters. Sorry, that was uncalled for. Apologize for my outburst. Oh, smaller groups. Trist and Emery refer to it as an enhancement of in-group and out-group prejudices as people seek to simplify their choices. The natural lines of social division emerge to become barricades. Like in Minnesota, society's response to such a psychological and political disintegration is the Orwellian fascist state, modeled in his book, 1984. In the book, Big Brother regulates the lives and conflicts of people within a society. A never-ending conflict is waged by each group ruling against its own subjects, and the object of the war is not to make or prevent conquest of territory, but to keep the structure of society intact. You know, and it's so ironic that people on either side are using 1984 to condemn the other side, when I think people should be reading Animal Farm. We could even read that next. I think it's much more pertinent and relevant than 1984, which I get. Maybe they both are, but I feel like Animal Farm fits better because the pigs run the show and they separate everybody and make them all feel like if they're not. Anyway, maybe we'll get into that. That could be our next book. We'll vote on it though. So in the third scenario is the most intense, involving a withdrawal and retreat into private world and a withdrawal from social bounds that might entail being drawn into the affairs of others. How is this level of dissociation different from today's 15 to 24 age group? And this was written 10 years ago, so it's 25 to 35. How far removed are we from this moral and social outlook? Almost there, aren't we? Trist and Emery are convinced that men will be willing to accept the perverse inhumanity of man that characterized Nazism. Not necessarily the structure of the Nazi state, but the moral outlook of Nazi society. To survive in such a state, people will need to create a new religion. Wolff states the old religious forms, especially Western Christianity, demand that man be responsible for his fellow humans. The new religious forms will be a form of mystical anarchism, a religious experience much likened to satanic practices of the Nazis or the view of Carl Jung. This is the New Age, the Age of Aquarius, preached by Tavistock and Frankfurt School, with its Eastern mystical religious cults that had young, brainwashed converts flocking to embrace this degeneracy. Again, it is television that provides a social glue that binds the minds of the population to their new religious forms. I listened to a speech from somebody who I can't quite mention, but who was just referenced. I think before he came into power. And it was interesting. I'm still debating on whether or not I play it during this live stream or not. Maybe I will. Newspeak. Most Americans and Europeans alike believe that there is such a thing as a free press. One of the key areas of brainwashing the population. One of the key areas in brainwashing the population. Most Americans and Europeans get most of their news from state-controlled television, under the misconception that reporters are meant to serve the public. In fact, reporters do not serve the public. Reporters are paid employees that serve the media owners whose companies' shares are traded on Wall Street. Of the 6 to 8 hours per day Americans spend watching television, for example, a couple hours is spent watching current affairs programming. Control over the media has been a long-term objective of the globalist elite. In February 1917, Oscar Callaway placed a statement in the Congressional Record describing the origins of what he called the newspaper combination. According to that account, the J.P. Morgan banking interest and their allies got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States and the sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of the daily press in the United States. Today, the new media monopoly puts the number of five corporations controlling America's fourth estate. As I explain in my book on the Bilderberg Group, in 1993 August-September edition, the prestigious Dutch magazine Exposure outlined disturbing details about how the Tavistock Institute for Behavioral Analysis planned to control the boards of the 3 major and most prestigious television networks in the United States: NBC, CBS, and ABC. All 3 television networks came as spin-offs from the Radio Corporations of America, or RCA. These organizations and institutions that theoretically are in competition with each other, this is part of the independence that ensures Americans enjoy unbiased news, are in fact closely interfaced and interlocked with countless companies and banks, making it almost impossible task to untangle them. Take NBC, for example. NBC has been affiliated with RCA, a media conglomerate, and is now a subsidiary of Morgan-controlled General Electric. You can walk normal. Just taking longer squeak steps. Okay, and is now a subsidiary of Morgan-controlled General Electric. I already said that. So on RCA's board sits Thornton Bradshaw, president of Atlantic Richfield Oil and member of the World Wildlife Fund, the Club of Rome, the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, and the Council on Foreign Relations. Bradshaw is also chairman of NBC. He's on the board of RCA and is the chairman of NBC. Council of Foreign Relations is part of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. RIIA, is a front organization for the Round Table Group, stemmed from a secret society created by British magnate Cecil Rhodes to unite the world, beginning with the English-speaking Sorry, I was distracted by a man walking with snacks. Dominions under enlightened elites like himself. Quigley, Tragedy and Hope. I don't know what that is. That was just in parentheses. Maybe that's where that information comes from. So this front organization, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, RIIA, had as its nucleus in each area the existing submerged Round Table Group. In New York, it is known as the Council on Foreign Relations. RCA's most legendary role, however, was the services it provided to British intelligence during World War II. Sorry. Seeing the snacks made my mouth water. RCA's most legendary role, however, was its service provided to British intelligence during World War II. I already read that. I'm sorry. Of particular note, RCA's president, David Sarnoff, moved to London at the same time Sir William Stephenson of Interpret fame moved into the RCA building in New York. Today, RCA's directorate is made up of British American establishment figures that belong to other organizations such as CFR, NATO, the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Roundtable, etc. Among the MBC directors named in the exposure article were John Bradamus, CFR TC Bilderberg, a director of the Rockefeller Foundation, Peter Peterson, CFR, a former head of Kuhn, Loeb & Co., or Rothschild's Group, and a former U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Robert Cizik, a chairman of RCA, and the First City Bancorp, which was identified in congressional testimony as a Rothschild bank. Clearly, the NBC board is considerably influenced by the Rockefeller-Rothschild-Morgan Troika, Troika, Troika. What does that mean? I'm going to type it in the chat, Troika, highlight, and look up. Troika means a Russian vehicle pulled by a team of 3 horses, or a group of 3 people working together, especially in administrative or managerial capacity. Troika, where was it? Leading exponents of the One World Company Ltd. ABC is owned by Disney Corporation. It has 153 TV stations. Chase Manhattan Bank controls 6.7% of ABC's stock, enough to give it a controlling interest. Chase, through its trust department, controls 14% of CBS, 4.5% of RCA. Instead of 3 competing networks called NBC, CBS, and ABC, what we really have is a Rockefeller Broadcasting Company. The Rockefeller Broadcasting System and the Rockefeller Broadcasting Consortium. On the ABC Board of Directors is Ray Adam, Director of J.P. Morgan's Metropolitan Life and Morgan Guarantee Trust, Frank Carey, a chairman of IBM and director of J.P. Morgan and the Morgan Guarantee Trust, John T. Connor, CFR, of the Kuhn Loeb Rothschild's law firm, George Jenkins, chairman of Metropolitan Life, or J.P. Morgan, and Citibank, a Rothschild's connection, Martin J. Schwab, director of Manufacturers Hanover, which is a Rothschild's company. Isn't it strange how the same Rockefeller, Rothschild, Morgan characters on the board of the ABC networks, which we are told is independent of NBC, appears to represent the competition? ABC was taken over by Cities Communication, whose most prominent director is Robert Russa, CFR, and Bilderberg, senior partner of the Brown Brothers, Harriman, which has close ties with the Bank of England. Russa and David Rockefeller are credited with selecting Paul Volcker to chair the Federal Reserve Board. Selections of Volcker formed part of Tavistock's plan for a permanent condition of social turbulence. Can you imagine being in one of them families? Good old Big Brother. It's right. Here, let me erase this. It's big time. Like, how do they even live? Oh man, I had my finger on it. The stuff at this point, like, I know it's important to know, and it's enlightening to see it all laid out on the page. But sure reading like stereo instructions at this moment. Yeah. She said it's weird just hearing at this as I'm getting into my GE fridge. Right. So CBS is owned by Viacom, which has over 200 TV stations and 255 radio affiliations nationwide. This huge media conglomerate owns, among other companies, MTV, Showtime, VH1, TNN, CMT, 39 broadcast television stations, 184 radio stations, and Paramount Pictures. As an American intelligence officer, CBS founder William Paley was trained in mass brainwashing techniques during World War II at the Tavistock Institute in England. It all comes back to this place, man. The financial expansion of CBS was supervised for a long time by Brown Brothers Harriman and its senior partner Prescott Bush, father and grandfather to presidents. Who was a CBS director? The board includes Chairman Paley, for whom Prescott Bush personally organized the money to buy the company. Harold Brown, CFR, Executive Director of the Trilateral Commission and former Secretary of the Air Force and of Defense of the U.S., Roswell Gilpatrick, CFR in Bilderberg, from the Kuhn-Loeb Rothschild's firm, Henry B. Schnatt, Director of the Chase Manhattan Bank, Rockefeller and Rothschilds, CFR Bookings Institute, and then Franklin A. Thomas, CFR, head of the Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation, Newton D. Miner, CFR, director of the Rand Corporation, and many others. The Ditchley Foundation, which is closely linked to the Tavistock Institute in London, and the Bilderberg Group, that last guy, Newton D. Miner. Anyway, who is also the trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation and Carnegie Institution. So are the Rothschilds and Rockefeller families, who are the leading groups in a tightly controlled field of communications working closely with Tavistock Institute in London. Yeah, they seem to be for us, not them. Somebody said, I thought we had monopoly laws. Fox News, part of News Corp, with their daily Nuremberg rallies for couch potatoes, is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who owns a significant part of the world's media, amongst them his flagship publication, The Wall Street Journal, MySpace, and 20th Century Fox Movie Studio. Murdoch's media empire has been the main propaganda outlet for the perpetual war of the neocons and their Nazi minions. Then there's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS, supposedly a public institution. According to its website, PBS is a nonprofit media enterprise owned and operated by the nation's public television stations. A trusted community resource, PBS uses the power of non-commercial television, the internet, and other media to enrich the lives of all Americans through quality programs and education services that inform, inspire, and delight. Available to 99% of American homes with television and to an increasing number of digital multimedia households. PBS serves nearly 90 million people each week. I think we found out a lot about PBS through Doge. And I think people didn't want to hear it because it was done through Doge. The cornerstone of PBS's programming was, until a few years ago, the evening television's news program, The NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Jim Lehrer, 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 I didn't watch much PBS, is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. For most of PBS's history, funding was provided by AT&T, a CFR company. Archer Daniels Midland, whose chairman Dwayne Anders was a member of the Trilateral Commission, PepsiCo, a CFR company, whose chief executive officer, Indra Krishnamurthy Nuyi, oh my God, why they gotta do me like that, is a Bilderberg and Trilateral Commission Executive Committee member, and Smith Barney, a CFR company, one of the world's leading financial institutions. Furthermore, Smith Barney is interlocked with Citigroup, a global financial services company that is a member of the Bilderberg Group, CFR, and the Trilateral Commission. And he doesn't mention there how much government funds were being poured into PBS. Journalists who participate in the NewsHour are some of the best-known political pundits in the United States, such as Paul Godot, David Gregan, William Crystal, is that Billy Crystal? And William Sapphire. All of them are members of Bilderberg Group, CFR, and the Trilateral Commission. God, this is like, it's nauseating, it's droning on, but they're all in the same friggin' company. Would it be reasonable for us to suspect that PBS might not be quite as impartial? I mean, it's obviously not impartial in certain delicate matters of public interest, such as the U.S. constitutional crisis envisioned by the Brzezinski, the future of nation-state republics, and of national sovereignty. Still not convinced? American media elites practiced a brutal, albeit well-concealed, form of wartime news censorship, but the mechanisms of this control are now openly acknowledged. John Chancellor, the longtime NBC TV news anchorman, in his recent autobiographical account of life in the newsroom, The New News Business, admitted that through formal structure such as the Associated Press, informal clubs such as the New York Council on Foreign Relations, decisions are made on a daily or weekly basis about what the American people will be told and what stories will never see the light of day. David Rockefeller specifically identified the New York Times and the Washington Post as key media organs for the power elite. As Michael Chosudowski explains on the pages of globalresearch.com, I thought it was a period. Historically, the New York Times, with utterly unwarranted self-assurances, designates itself the arbiter of all the news that's fit to print, has served the interests of the Rockefeller family in the context of a long-standing relationship. The current New York Times chairman, Arthur Sulzberger Jr., is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, son of Arthur OCHS. I'm sorry. I was like, I'm going to spell it, and then I pronounced the S at the end, is Sulzberger, and grandson of Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, who served as a trustee for the Rockefeller Foundation. Ethan Bronner, deputy foreign editor of the New York Times, as well as Thomas Friedman, among others, are also members of the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR. I feel like that was nice that they reminded us what CFR was, because I had lost it. So, America's corporate media are an integral part of the economic establishment, with links to Wall Street, the Washington think tanks, Club Bilderberg, and the Council on Foreign Relations. And through them, to the world's premier brainwashing center, Tavistock Institute. CFR is the premier U.S. foreign policy think tank in the United States, and is one of the central institutions for socializing American elites from all major sectors of society: media, banking, academia, military, intelligence, diplomacy, corporations, NGOs, civil society, etc., where they work together to construct a consensus on major issues related to American imperial interests around the world. As such, the CFR often sets the strategy for American policy and wields enormous influence within policy circles, where key players almost always come from the rank and file of the CFR itself. CFR former President Sir Winston Lord made an interesting observation when he said that the Trilateral Commission doesn't secretly run the world. The Council on Foreign Relations does that. In his October 30th, 1993 ruling class journalists essay in the Washington Post, Ombudsman Richard Harwood candidly discussed how the CFR dominates the news media. Harwood described it as the closest thing we have to a ruling establishment in the United States. Its members are the people who, for more than a half a century, have managed our international affairs and our military-industrial complex. After listing the executive branch positions then occupied by CFR members, Harwood continued, what is distinctly modern about the council these days is the considerable involvement of journalists and other media figures, who account for more than 10% of the membership. The editorial page editor, deputy editor, page editor, executive editor, managing editor, foreign editor. I thought they were messing with me there for a second. National affairs editor, business and financial editor, and various writers, as well as the now deceased Katharine Graham, the paper's principal owner, represent the Washington Post in the council's membership. Observed Harwood. These media heavyweights do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it, he concluded, rather than offering an independent perspective on our rulers' actions. The establishment media act as the ruling elite's voice, conditioning the public to accept and even embrace insider designs that otherwise might not be politically attainable. Propaganda campaign. Even in the age of internet, blogospheres, and other new generation contraptions of mass dissemination of information, the Times and the Post, both Bilderberg and CFR companies, set the tone for most news coverage. Not anymore. Not anymore. Defining issues and setting the limits of respectable opinion. They sure try to. There are people who are hanging on to that, but I think for all of this horror that I've been covering in the protocols and now in this Tavistock Institute book, for every action is an equal and opposite reaction, and I think we're in the upswing. Maybe I'm just being hopeful. But I do think for all the evil we see in the world, all the lies, all the manipulation, truth is about to make an explosive comeback. It's on its way. And we're here doing it together. So, consider, for example, Sudan or Libya to illustrate how the mainstream ruling class journalists help make foreign policy through a blatant propaganda campaign. Saturation reporting from a crisis region. Emergency calls for help broadcasts on the electronic media, such as the one recently on the CFR-run PBS. Televised pictures of refugees, such as the ones recently on CFR-run Fox and CNN. And let's also consider how much was buried about what was happening in Gaza. Lurid stories of mass grapes. I need to fix my language or they're going to demonetize my channel. Grapes, which are surely designed to titillate as much as provoke outrage. Reproachful evocations of the Rwandan genocide, demands that something must be done. How can we stand idly by, etc. Editorials in the CFR-run New York Times, Washington Post, Newsweek, Time Magazine, and in CFR's own Foreign Affairs magazine, with long-winded opinion pieces by Bilderberg CFR member. Look at that. Zbigniew Brzezinski. His last name was easier. Calling for a return of the days of Rudyard Kipling's benevolent imperialism. And finally, the announcement that plans are needed. No, that plans are indeed being drawn up for an intervention. Now let's turn on the television and see for ourselves how the news is packed for our consumption. All news items are told in short bits, most running no longer than 30 seconds. A major news item may run up to a minute or a minute and a half. Voiceover pictures, short interviews, usually only a few sentences, a few snippets of disjointed thought. The average half-hour segment may report up to 40 items, all presented in a seamless style, followed by sports, weather, entertainment, and idle banter between news readers. But are we witnessing real events from the world? Is that how complex world issues are seen in situ? You remember when they played the collage of all the news media outlets? What do they call them? Journalists saying the same thing? Libya shoehorned into the 30-second soundbite Afghanistan's 2,000 years of history into a 45-second interview, dissected into 3 shorter interview bits, each consisting of 3 sentences or 6 words. Or is it a badly distorted picture that the newsreader tells you is reality? Given the way the news is presented, does your mind ever engage in deliberative thought about any single item? No, it doesn't. Rather, you watch, merely take in the information in the format it's presented to you. And if you dig further, you're called a conspiracy theorist. Would it surprise you then if I told you that within 2 hours, most viewers could only remember vague summaries about what they saw? Middle East is on fire, more civilians were killed somewhere, floods wiped out a large chunk of land in, yes, where? European economy is weak and another country has asked to be rescued. There was an earthquake in Japan and miraculously someone survived. A 9-day ordeal buried in rubble. Wow, cool. Get that person on the Oprah Winfrey show. Hi, Mom, I'm on TV. In this article on the cartelization of the news industry, Jeffrey Steinberg explains that even the live coverage of car crashes, gang murders, grapes, natural disasters, war, terrorist acts is served up on the basis of careful studies conducted at the neurological division of the leading medical schools. In recent decades, psychological warfare experts have unveiled a new pseudoscience called victimology. That seems to be in play big time these days, developed by the London's Tavistock Institute, which is premised upon the theory that individuals can be put through trauma by being exposed to shockingly graphic visual accounts of violence, almost like how they assassinated Charlie Kirk in front of all of us. They did the same thing with Kennedy. His was a little bit more gruesome, but Charlie's was real up close and personal. This type of brainwashing, according to Lonnie Wolf, is called selective retention. They want you to forget about it. And Candace Owens is a demon for even still talking about it. Anyway, I'm pissed about that a little bit. So, crap. This type of brainwashing, according to Lonnie Wolf, is called selective retention. Television causes people to suspend their critical judgment capabilities because the combination of sound and images placed the individual in a dreamlike state, which limits cognitive powers. You can't even think about it because they're just hammering, something else. Medication commercial, boner pills commercial. Ooh, I probably shouldn't say boner. Anyway, I said it twice. All right. Not made for children. If you were to summarize the news items, what would you say? I'm going to sneeze. That took a couple tries. I don't know if you saw my post, but there was a quadruple amputee, professional cornhole player who was driving, and while driving, shot his friend in the seat next to him and killed him. And I did #believe in yourself because that is crazy. You know, rest in peace, and sorry for the guy's family. That's incredible. Yeah, I remember where I was and what I was wearing when I heard about it. I mean, that dude pulled me out of my own. I feel like I was under hypnosis, serious brainwashing. Oh my gosh, look at how much of chapter 5 is still left, y'all. We're going to stop soon. Well, 10 minutes. There's a lot to cover in this, though. This is intense. So, and I was reacting to a comment. My friend had just printed tickets to see Charlie speak at USU campus 2 hours before it happened. And they were talking about him all morning. All right. Pardon my sneezes and coughs and stuttering. So, if you were to summarize the news items, what would you say? That we are living in a violent and degraded society? In other words, a degraded view of man as animal, killing, murdering, raping innocent people the world over. Secondary image, economic collapse, fear, and hopelessness. You are left with the vivid image of society planted in your head. It is painted thus because no cognitive thought process was used to arrive at the real story behind the events. And if you're afraid for the future, you want to give it to all the people in charge and say, I trust you to do it. I voted. Because that counts for something, doesn't it? And at this point, I don't think it does unless you have $250 million and a wall to kiss. So, Hal Becker from the Futures Group contends that through the control of the television news programming, he can create popular opinion by manipulating the way you think and act. Quote, Americans think they are governed by some bureaucrats in Washington who make laws and hand out money. How wrong they are. Americans are ruled by their prejudices, and their prejudices are organized by public opinion. We think that we make up our minds about everything. We are so conceited. Public opinion makes up our minds. It works our herd instinct, like we are frightened animals. But there's a big difference between being a beast and a man. The difference lies in our search for eternal truth and for the meaning of life. Truth always lies in the higher order of processes and in the creative power of the individual human mind. So it's a moral problem, the problem of mankind's destiny that no animal can ever solve. Every generation must advance beyond that of the preceding generation, and that hope, that will happen, should be what's on the mind of the person who is dying of old age. It's okay. It's just a little noisy. Dying of old age. That their life has meant something because it laid the foundation for a better life than they knew. On the other hand, people like Freud, Bertrand Russell, Eric Trist, Emery Adorno, who believe, there is no significant difference. I'm sorry. I'm going to wait a second. How y'all doing? This is a hard read. If I weren't reading this aloud to you guys, this chapter would have probably stopped me in my tracks, if we're being honest. And I'd have picked up another one. Just because when they start listing, this was 3 pages of people being listed and their affiliation, just to explain who owns the media. Can you chill? The water. See, and that's the thing in Pampa. You have to pay a water bill to use the water that you can't drink because it's full of arsenic and white chunks if you let it settle. Friggin' Texas. Anyway, did I just tell you where I live? We're moving soon. Anyway. On the other hand, nope. Yeah. On the other hand, I'll start over because that was noisy when I was reading that. On the other hand, people like Freud, Bertrand Russell, Eric Trist, Emery Adorno, who believe there is no significant difference between man and animal, must deny the existence and relevance of eternal truth and our search for the meaning of life to render all men morally insane. Yeah. I have like 3 or 4 books open or bookmarked. I have a book running in my Kindle also I haven't been back to. But that one was interesting because I've been looking into Tartaria and all that lost technology and so forth and old maps and stuff. But that book reads like these last few pages going through everybody's credentials because they're analyzing maps and what is it called? The numbers. coordinates and stuff. Yeah. Television. Yeah. I'm glad that I'm glad they're out in the booyah. Who is that? Let me see. What's your name? Yes, Tartaria is fascinating. And all of the world fairs was like their last hurrah before they tore down all those buildings. They still have those. Did you even know that? World fairs. Hello, Irish. Nice to meet you. Glad you're here with us. My friend Eddie, who called me Mander up earlier in the chat, is from the Bayou. So that's what I thought. That's what I feel like your name says. Maybe it's a play on the letters. Neat. Washington. I used to live in Kent, outside of Seattle. And I didn't have a driver's side window in my car. And I bathed dogs at Petco. And I was like 18. And so my car was moldy. I was waterlogged. And I lived there for a couple years and I was over it. But it's beautiful. I love visiting. There's a lot of stuff to love about Washington. So, television, with its overwhelming presence in your life, both creates popular opinion and simultaneously validates it. How is it done exactly? That's because your identity, thanks to television, is shaped by what others think about them. A constant and unending desire to act as you perceive others would want you to act. For example, America is saying no to drugs, according to the latest polls by Gallup, says a smiling face of a young journalist on CNN. Is that right? Are we supposed to believe this nonsense just because the poll says so? Or like 100% approval rating? I can't believe they aired that. Or because CNN says so? As Becker says, quote, the world is in that box and it's there every night. Well, it's really a lot more than that, 6 to 8 hours per day. In a sense, the news media generally tells one story, the saga of government as savior on nearly every conceivable issue, domestic or foreign. News stories are designed to encourage readers and viewers to look to government intervention as a solution. In other words, the establishment media are guilty of conscious and willing accomplices in the power's elite drive for global control. Because in order to control the world, the power elite must conquer the public mind. And as Walter Lippmann reminds us, news and the truth are not the same thing. I'm going to stop there because it's a break in the chapter. WikiLeaks and the role of corporate media will be covered tomorrow. I just punched my pedestal. Oh, Ricky. Sweet, sweet man. Thank you. How incredible. Whose birthday is it? Oh, thank you for being here. Either way, this was a droning on sort of. Yeah, no, it's not my birthday. Out in the booty. Okay, so Irish, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. I won't sing. Wonderful. I'm so glad we got to celebrate your birthday today on my live stream. Thank you for sharing. I don't know if he did a World's Fair in Iowa. That'd be incredible. Yeah. Isn't that incredible? It was just, and I was there, and we're talking about Seattle, Washington again, Kent, the suburbs. I was there when they arrested the Green River Killer. Outside the front of the house, the porch, I was standing, there was cops in this, like, there was a bit of a park where I would go get blue ringer cubensi mushrooms that grew wild. And I'm telling you, I was 18. It's when 9/11 happened, and the Green River Killer was arrested just a block away from my house. I watched it happen. It is not my birthday as well, so that's okay. Don't be confused. Tacoma, the aroma of Tacoma. Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of critical events happened to me while I was in Seattle, and I was inundated, steeped with the mold and the wetness. Um, but it was cool. It was a good experience. I'm glad that I lived there and spent some time in the underground music scene there. Um, Wonderful people. I couldn't deal with how wet it was. And from there, I lived in Denver. So that was a nice change. It was beautiful, the mountains. I've always lived by mountains. And I live now in the panhandle of Texas, and it's just flat and dusty and windy, and I'm over it. So we're going up north. I have loved today, even though the book was a little droning. Um, yeah, I was walking the Green River. Like, I would get all angsty and pissed at my boyfriend at the time and go for a walk up where they were finding bodies. And I didn't know anything about it until after they arrested him. And then I was like, oh, I was captivated. But I was like, my goodness, I could have got myself in trouble. But he was only going after ladies of the night. So, and my mom called me when 9/11 happened. She's like, they're attacking our country. And I remember the news guy at the time, like the head of the news, he had dark hair. And he even said while he was watching it, that looked like a demolition. And we still don't have the story on that, but that's where I first had an awakening. That's where I first engaged in like politics with my whole heart, was with 9/11. I'm like, they're lying to us. I need to drink more water. I just noticed how crusty my lips are. No, it was out in the booyah. Irish is his name. His or her, I'm sorry. Irish. I don't mean to assume. Anyway, thanks for being here. I'm going to sign off. We're doing some construction. Do you want to see? Look at this mess. Fixing a windowsill. Paint. We have to paint this week. We're getting an appraisal. We got to fix that too. So we're going to be busy. Thank you again, Ricky. Oh, you make my days. All right, guys. Bye. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm not sure if it'll be early or late, so replays will be fine. But if you're subscribed, you have to be. If you're commenting, hit the bell so you know when I go on. Join me. It'll be fun. We'll talk soon. Love you guys. Bye.